Was the Bible copied from ancient texts by Billy Carson?
The story ends with the gods, Enki and Enlil, intervening in the debate and declaring Ashnan the winner. The similar story between, from the biblical text is the debate between Sumer and Winter. The gods create Emish, Sumer for vegetation and the abundance of the earth. Aten, Emesh's brother, identified with Winter, was responsible for the fertility of livestock. When the brothers fight, Enlil declares Emish the more important of the two, and they reconcile after Enlil's ruling. The same Cain and Abel story over and over again, right? The two debates discussed above bear the most striking resemblance to the Genesis story of Cain and Abel, Genesis 4:1 through 4:16. Like the debates, the story of Cain and Abel involves quarreling siblings, but while the debate tablets discuss relatively insignificant events, the story of Cain and Abel is amongst the most tragic tales in the Bible, one of the very first recorded murders, right? When God appreciates Abel's offerings but not Cain's, Cain becomes jealous and angry. God warns Cain not to give in to his anger, but Cain does not listen and kills his brother Abel in envious rage. God punishes Cain by cursing him to wander ceaselessly. Now, what does he do? God tells Cain, "You've got to get out of here." And Cain goes, in the Bible, he says, "But the people out there will kill me." So wait a minute. If you believe in the version that most people believe in of the Bible, you know that there's Adam, Eve, Cain and Abel, right? Cain kills Abel. So now there's Adam, Eve, and Cain. Now Cain gets kicked out of the garden, but all of a sudden he knows that there's people out there. What people? That's in the Bible. There were millions of people already here. When Adam and Eve arrived here, there were already people here. Adam and Eve were not the first people on this planet. They were the first Homo sapien version, first genetically modified by the Anunnaki, to be able to reproduce in a certain type of way. The other people, a lot of them weren't able to reproduce in that way, and the ones who were creating a lot of rarities, giants that didn't have long lifespan. All kind of crazy stuff was going on according to these texts. But when you look at the story of the Adamu, when Isis says, "I'm going to take this baby to term and I'm going to bring forth the first one that works the proper way," and she takes one of the existing hominids, which was our cousins on this planet, takes the egg out of her womb and puts it into her own womb and takes it to term for 10 months, and then she gives birth to the Adamu, which means first man. That was Adam. It means that he was the first perfectly created man that can actually reproduce on his own, that had enough common sense and logic and wisdom and understanding to take orders, but also to think for himself. And then they tried to mate him with some of the other people that were there, and the mating wasn't working. So then they took some more genetic material from him, and then they cloned or recreated an Eve and had them mate. When they figured out that worked and they can have a baby, then they duplicated that experiment over and over and over again. They made a lot of Adams through the same process. Not Adam having babies with Eve, but them creating new Adams and new Eves and having them live in this Eden, Edin, which was located in Mesopotamia, which is now modern day Iraq, according to the tablets, not according to Billy Carson. And in this mating area, they had certain specific times they could and couldn't mate. And if you violated that, you would be punished. So they were cattle. They were like cattle. And that's why when Enki comes and sneaks up into the garden and starts giving them knowledge, that was the snake. And Lil comes back and discovered that they had gained some knowledge about themselves and realized that they weren't animals, that they were sentient beings. He gets pissed off and calls his brother a snake in the tablets, you see? Unlike the debate between Sumer and Winter, Cain and Abel do not reconcile. It is a story that teaches us about the consequences of our actions, human fallibility, and so forth and so on. So basically, it's a remix of ancient stories. All this is remixed stuff, you see? So we do a little comparison since we're wrapping up part one of a 4-part series. The Sumerian tablets. The oldest tablet recorded dates back to around 2300 BCE, but the story is likely much, much older. We're talking about tens of thousands of years old, because now we have found tablets that are much older than 2300 BCE, okay? It's polytheistic, multiple gods, has many recorded creation stories, that are often incomplete because of broken tablets and such. But ironically, the parts that weren't broken make it into the Bible. Interesting. Then you have the Sumerian tradition, which includes the Great Flood story, Eridu Genesis. Ziusudra is rewarded with eternal life. The Sumerians wrote many debate stories called disputations, which mimic Cain and Abel's story. And you look at the book of Genesis, their side-by-side comparison. You see the comparisons there. You see the slight remixing going on. You see that the text that made it into that part of Genesis was mostly just plagiarized text from ancient tablets, which then were slightly remixed in some cases, but ultimately come from ancient text. Very important stuff. Very, very important stuff. And so why is it important to know this? Because it's important to know and understand who you are and where you came from, how we got here, and what happened in the ancient past. Because until we find out what really happened in the ancient past, we can't plan for a better future, because the past is prologue. We're in a loop. This stuff keeps happening over and over and over again. We keep going through this vicious cycle of rise and fall of civilizations. We keep going through this vicious cycle of situations that happened in the past reappearing on our timeline and happening over and over again. See, if you go back in time to 2023 BCE, you'll find the same exact stuff we're going through now happening back then. Not necessarily with the technology level, but with the social issues. You'll find it. Every section, every era of time that you have in our current era, match and go back and study history for that previous area in BCE, you'll find the same stuff happening. It's like we're in a time loop. We keep doing it over and over and over and over again. Until we understand and know this kind of stuff, until we dig deep into the information that we've been fed and forced to analyze it, break it apart, rip it apart, and put it back together again, until then, we'll continue to go through this vicious cycle of rise and fall of civilizations, rise and fall of awareness and knowledge and ascension and wisdom. We'll keep getting to a certain point and falling right back down again. At some point, we got to learn how to walk, and then we got to learn how to run. You see? Thank you, Big Fire Gaming. I appreciate you. It's this big cycle, you know. He says, let me see what he says here. What happened to the Anunnaki? Why are they gone now? Good question. The Anunnaki actually are not gone. They're still here. If you look at the text, you discover there was a second pyramid war which occurred between Amun-Ra and his relatives. Some fled and some stayed. They actually dropped what they called, listen to this, weapons of mass destruction on this planet. WMDs. Yeah, in ancient times. You thought George Bush Jr. came up with that term for the Iraq War? Where do you think he got it from? The tablets. And in this dropping of these weapons, it created something called an evil wind in the text. And then this evil wind, whoever was in it, where this evil wind was moving, we're talking about nuclear fallout of some type, radiation fallout. People's fingernails were falling off. Their hair was falling out. Their nose and eyes were bleeding. This is all symbols. Their skin was boiling. This is all signs of radiation sickness. And when you look at the region that it was talked about being dropped in, you find the Mohenjo-Daro and the Indus Valley. You find the Giza Plateau and many other areas around the region where sand and buildings were vitrified and turned into glass. Matter of fact, in the Indus Valley, bodies are still laying in the street. Google Indus Valley, Mohenjo-Daro. You'll see bodies laying in the street, holding hands, just the skeletons that have never, ever, ever been eaten by any wild animals because they're radiated. So we know that there was a nuclear war of some type in the ancient past. In this text, some of these beings fled to safe areas and some left. The ones that stayed continue to mate with humans and create offspring, and their ancestors and their bloodline is walking amongst us this very day. So in some ways, genetically, they never left. And all of us, including every single human on this planet, has a little touch of that DNA in our body. Any Homo sapiens sapien has a little slight touch of that DNA in our body. So
full video and playlist linked below. Spiritual News Television. AA Creation 9